metre-long skid marks. My crime scene assessment told me very clearly there could only be 2 cars to make all these marks. A few months later, there was a general announcement from the French police that there was 2 cars involved. There was a white Fiat Uno. All sorts of notices went out to all registered white Fiat Unos to present their cars to a police station. A man presented his car to a police station in Paris and showed the papers, and the police went out to inspect it.
They laughed at the police, called them conspiracy theorists, but then Diana's secret diary was found. What was written inside made investigators go silent, page after page of chilling predictions. She knew exactly what would happen to her. She named names. She described how they'd do it.
In the past 12 years, I can honestly say that one of my greatest pleasures has been my association with people like yourself. During those years, I've met many thousands of wonderful and extraordinary people, both here and around the world.
And it matched the crash perfectly. The royal family tried to keep this buried for decades, but now the diary is public, and what's on page 47 will make your blood run cold. Diana wasn't paranoid. She was right. And this changes everything we thought we knew. When someone dies unexpectedly, there's always that moment where you look around and realize there was no clear reason for it to happen. No warning signs, no logical explanation. And when that person is known and loved by millions, the shock goes even deeper. For years after that night in Paris, the truth stayed buried beneath layers of speculation, grief, and unanswered questions. But recently, new information has come to light that's changed how people view what happened. The head of the police investigation has come forward with statements that challenge what the public believed for so long. According to him, that night wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. The final moments were more complicated than anyone realized. Behind the crash was a series of decisions, some made out of fear, others driven by power and protocol. Every choice that was made is now being looked at again with fresh eyes. The Alma Tunnel in Paris remains a place that brings back painful memories even decades later. It's there, under the dark streets of the city, that Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed lost their lives. The crash happened suddenly. News outlets picked it up within minutes. "Diana is gone," the headlines read. Almost immediately, crowds began to gather in cities across the world. Cameras flashed constantly. People stood in the streets and cried openly, struggling to process what they'd just heard. The wreckage of the black Mercedes became an image burned into public memory, a symbol of loss that felt almost too heavy to bear. How could this happen, people kept asking. The question echoed through London, Paris, and in homes around the globe. This wasn't just the death of a royal figure. For many, it felt deeply personal. Diana had connected with people in a way that few public figures ever do. She visited hospitals, held hands with the sick, spoke openly about her struggles, and showed a kind of warmth that seemed genuine. The whole world was grieving, not as distant observers, but as people who felt they'd lost someone they truly cared about. One mourner standing outside Buckingham Palace whispered that they loved her, and thousands of others felt the same. Diana's funeral was watched by millions. The streets were packed with people holding flowers. Walls were covered with tributes and handwritten notes. The day didn't pass easily. People held their breath through every moment of the service, and the pain didn't fade with time. Even years later, many admitted that it still hurt to think about that day. It took a full 10 years before a British inquest officially began. Many had been waiting for it, hoping that finally there would be answers. Families of those who died wanted clarity. The public wanted to know what really went wrong. The inquest was set to last 6 months and would cost millions of pounds, but to most people, the money didn't matter. They just wanted the truth. The coroner in charge made it clear from the start that he was determined to run the process openly and thoroughly. As part of that effort, he chose to show previously unseen footage from Diana's final night. No one outside the investigation had watched these clips before, and seeing them for the first time brought everything back in sharp detail. Piece by piece, the last hours of Diana's life were laid out in front of the jury and the public. One particular moment stood out. Diana and Dodi were seen holding hands for nearly 8 minutes. There were no words exchanged, just that quiet gesture. To many watching, it said everything. The coroner noted that this simple act revealed the closeness between them. There was also a short video clip of Diana smiling. That smile, frozen in time, became difficult for people to look at. She looked happy. She looked like nothing was wrong. One person who viewed the footage said it made the tragedy even harder to accept. The jury was tasked with examining 20 different points related to the crash. They had to go deep into the details, one member explained afterward. Their job was to look closely at the role of the paparazzi who had chased the car through the streets of Paris. They also had to consider the actions of Henry Paul, the driver of the Mercedes that night. Letters from Prince William, Prince Harry, and Prince Philip were submitted to the court. One of them reportedly asked the inquest not to rush. The royal family wanted a thorough investigation, not a quick one. People outside the courtroom felt the same way. They'd already waited 10 years. A little more time didn't matter if it meant getting real answers. 2 years after the crash, a French judge named Hervé Stéphane released his findings. His report concluded that Henry Paul had been drunk and shouldn't have been behind the wheel, but doubts remained, especially in Britain. The first British coroner who was assigned to the case passed away before he could even start the inquest. The second coroner handed the investigation over to Lord Stevens, who was Britain's top police officer at the time. Stevens led a new investigation and eventually produced a detailed report. His findings stated there were no signs of a conspiracy, no evidence of a planned attack. But shortly after that, the coroner stepped down. Next came Lady Butler Sloss, who was seen as intelligent and capable, but not everyone trusted her. Some critics claimed she lacked the right kind of experience for such a high-profile case. Others feared she would keep the hearings private, away from public view. That idea caused an immediate backlash. People demanded that the process be open. Finally, the Court of Appeals ruled that a jury must be involved. After that decision, Butler Sloss resigned. She said she couldn't continue under those conditions. The fourth coroner was Lord Justice Scott Baker. In 2007, he officially opened the inquest. British law required it because the deaths had occurred on foreign soil. One of his first tasks was selecting a jury. Around 80 people were called in for consideration. It was a serious process, one juror later remembered. Each potential juror was asked whether they had any connections to the royal family, the Fayed family, or British intelligence agencies. The court insisted that everything had to be completely fair. In the end, only 25 people were chosen. The rest were dismissed, some because they held strong opinions about the case, others because they had personal ties that might create bias. As the inquest officially began, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavier. The coroner reminded everyone that this case mattered to people around the world, but he also urged the jury to stay focused. Stick to the facts, he told them. Don't get distracted by outside noise. From the very first day, they were confronted with difficult questions and emotional testimony. Footage from the Ritz Hotel quickly became a key piece of evidence. The security cameras showed Diana and Dodi walking through the halls of the hotel. They didn't appear to be worried or scared. They looked calm, even peaceful, one hotel worker recalled. They took the elevator together, then slipped out through a back entrance. Nothing in their body language suggested fear or panic. Henry Paul's condition also became a major point of focus. The French report had stated that his blood alcohol level was far above the legal limit, but the footage told a different story. It showed Paul walking steadily. At one point, he even bent down to tie his shoes. He looked completely fine, people said. That didn't match what the test results were showing. Doubts began to grow. Maybe the tests were wrong. Maybe something had been mixed up. The coroner warned the jury to be careful and to check whether anything in the evidence had been tampered with or mishandled. The jury was also asked to think about Diana's state of mind before the crash. Had she felt unsafe in the weeks leading up to that night? Did she suspect something might happen to her? Mohammed Al-Fayed, Dodi's father, was vocal in his belief that the crash was not an accident. He claimed it was planned. That statement shocked many people and pushed others to demand even more answers. Every part of the case was examined slowly and carefully. Nothing could be overlooked, the coroner insisted. This inquest wasn't just about gathering facts. It was about rebuilding trust. It was about facing fear. And most of all, it was about honoring the grief that so many people still carried. Back in 1995, 2 years before the crash, Princess Diana shared something deeply troubling with her lawyer, Lord Mishcon. She told him she didn't feel safe. It wasn't a casual comment made in passing. She was specific about her concerns and asked for better protection for her car. She wanted more security measures put in place around her movements. These weren't fleeting worries or paranoid thoughts. Diana made it clear that something didn't feel right to her, but Mishcon struggled to understand why she felt this way. He later admitted that he didn't fully believe her at the time. She was scared, he said, but he didn't know what to do with that information or how seriously to take it. Still, Mishcon felt concerned enough to reach out to Commander Jeffson for a second opinion. To his surprise, Jeffson's response was unexpected. He said he believed Diana, at least to some extent. That one sentence stayed with Mishcon. It suggested that Diana wasn't simply imagining threats. She wasn't being irrational. In fact, those who worked closely with her saw someone who appeared steady and focused. She didn't seem lost or confused. One aide recalled that Diana was very clear-headed during that period, even when discussing things that made her uncomfortable. Despite this, people continued to whisper about her mental health. The media often portrayed her as unstable or emotionally fragile. Stories circulated suggesting she was falling apart under the pressure of royal life and her failing marriage. But those who actually spent time with Diana saw something different. She never broke down publicly. When journalists called her unstable, she smiled and kept moving forward. At one charity lunch, she even joked about the gossip surrounding her. "Let them talk," she said lightly, and the people around her laughed. They didn't see someone on the edge of collapse. They saw someone who was holding on and doing her best to stay strong, her. Team knew the real story. They witnessed her pain from a marriage that had broken down completely. They saw the toll it took on her to live under constant scrutiny while trying to maintain her dignity and continue her work. "She didn't give up," one close friend stated. Diana kept pushing forward, kept showing up for the causes she cared about, and kept trying to be a good mother to her sons. By July 1997, Diana had officially stepped away from royal duties and much of the public life she'd known for years. For her, it felt like freedom. She had room to breathe for the first time in a long while. That summer, Mohammed Al Fayed invited Diana and her sons to spend time at his property in Saint-Tropez. She accepted the invitation. It felt like a fresh start, one observer noted. The trip seemed to offer her a sense of peace and normalcy that had been missing from her life. During that holiday, Diana grew closer to Dodi Fayed, Mohammed's son. What began as a friendship slowly shifted into something more. People who saw them together noticed the change. Diana looked happy again. She smiled in a way she hadn't in years. A tourist who spotted her during the trip remembered. There was a lightness about her that hadn't been there before. After the initial visit with her sons, Diana returned alone to join Dodi and his family aboard their yacht, the Jonical. Photographers captured images of them laughing, talking, and enjoying each other's company. But there were also moments when Diana asked to be left alone. She wanted space, one crew member said. She valued her privacy and needed time to herself, even in the middle of what seemed like a carefree vacation. The relationship between Diana and Dodi was still new and developing, but it was clear to those around them that there was genuine affection. On Saturday, August 30th, Diana, Dodi, and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones stepped off the yacht and made their way to the airport. They flew from Olbia to Paris. Photographers were already waiting when they arrived. Someone had tipped them off, or they'd simply guessed where Diana would be. Either way, they knew she was coming. Among the photographers gathered that day was a man named Fabrice Chasserie, who would later become part of the investigation into what happened. That day marked the first time all the key figures were together in one place: Diana, Dodi, Trevor, and Henri Paul. Up until then, their paths had crossed separately, but now they were all part of the same story. Henri Paul worked as the deputy head of security at the Ritz Hotel, which was owned by Mohammed Al Fayed. Paul had been with the hotel for years and was trusted by management, but he wasn't just an ordinary employee. It later emerged that he had connections to French intelligence services. That detail raised serious questions during the investigation. Some reporters and members of the public wondered whether British or foreign intelligence agencies had any involvement in the events of that night. Paul's close friends and colleagues rejected the idea that he was a spy. They insisted he wasn't working for any intelligence agency in a formal capacity. What seemed to be true based on later investigations was that Paul occasionally shared information about hotel guests with French security services. But it wasn't anything more than that, a former agent explained. He helped out now and then, providing details that might be useful, but he wasn't running operations or carrying out covert tasks. British MI6 files were checked thoroughly during the investigation. No evidence of a conspiracy or a planned operation was found. Still, the questions didn't stop. The fact that Paul had any connection at all to intelligence work made people uneasy. Paul spent much of that Saturday close to Diana and Dodi. He even drove them to the Villa Windsor, a historic property that the Fayed family owned. The villa had once been the home of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and it carried deep significance within royal history. Diana's visit there wasn't random. She knew it would make certain people in the royal family uncomfortable. Some saw it as a deliberate statement, a way of asserting her independence and signalling that she was moving forward on her own terms. Later that evening, Diana and Dodi returned to the Ritz Hotel. Security cameras captured their arrival. They entered the Grand Imperial Suite, one of the most luxurious rooms in the hotel. Not long after they settled in, Dodi left to visit a jewelry store. He wanted to buy something special, the jeweler later told investigators. He showed Diana a brochure before he went, and then instructed a hotel manager to pick up the ring he'd selected. The ring came from a collection with a name that translates to say, "Yes to me." It was placed in the hotel safe for security. Many people believed this meant an engagement was imminent, but no one could say for certain what Dodi's intentions were or whether he'd actually planned to propose that night. As the evening went on, Diana and Dodi made plans to go out to a restaurant, but when they realized how many photographers were waiting outside, they changed their minds. The pressure was becoming too much. The constant attention was exhausting, and they didn't want to deal with it. So they turned back. Henri Paul was called back to the hotel even though his shift had already ended. When he walked into the building, security footage showed him looking sharp and confident. But something seemed off to investigators who reviewed the tape later. Paul had disappeared for almost 3 hours before returning to the Ritz. No one could definitively say where he went during that time. That gap in his whereabouts raised new questions. The coroner mentioned it during the inquest as a detail that needed explanation. Investigators tried to piece together where Paul had been, but they struggled to find clear answers. At around 10 in the evening, Dodi cancelled their reservation. At a high-end restaurant, paparazzi had gathered outside in large numbers and it was clear they wouldn't get any privacy. "It's too risky," Dodi said, so they decided to stay at the Ritz and eat there instead. Security cameras continued to capture their movements. Diana and Dodi appeared more tense as the night wore on. The media presence never let up. There were always cameras, always people waiting for a glimpse of them. Henri Paul, now back on duty, walked around the hotel with a sense of purpose. He even stopped by the bar at one point, though no one knew exactly why he'd been asked to return to work. He moved through the building like someone who had a plan, someone who knew what needed to be done. It was the final stretch of a long and increasingly heavy day. Everything that had happened over the previous hours was building towards something, and in just a short time everything would change in the worst possible way. At around 20 minutes past 10 in the evening, Dodi Fayed had a quiet word with the Ritz night manager, Thierry Rocher. His voice was low and his tone serious. "I want to go to my apartment tonight," he told her. It was a simple statement, but it set off a chain of events that would lead to tragedy. Only a handful of people were informed about the change in plans. Henri Paul was one of them. Just a few minutes later, Rocher was spotted passing the message along to Paul and another hotel worker. Paul listened carefully to what she said. Then he pointed toward the chauffeur who had driven Diana and Dodi to the hotel earlier that evening. He walked over to another driver and began speaking with him. That brief conversation became part of a sequence that would end in disaster. Everyone in the hotel began moving differently after that. Staff members shifted into action mode. Henri Paul wasn't like the other hotel workers. He'd been at the Ritz for years and knew everyone. People trusted him. A co-worker later shared that Paul had access to areas and information that others didn't. The younger bodyguards, Trevor Rees-Jones and Kes Wingfield, looked to him for guidance that night. Paul was the one giving orders and everyone followed what he said. By 10:30, Paul stepped outside the hotel. He crossed the Place Vendôme to where a group of photographers had gathered. He spent several minutes talking with them. One photographer remembered that he stayed for about 7 minutes before heading back inside. At around 15 minutes to 11, he entered the bar area of the Ritz. He found one of his unfinished drinks and finished what was left in the glass. The bartender later recalled that he didn't look worried or nervous. He seemed calm and collected. At 10 minutes past 11, Paul went outside again. This time he spoke with the driver of Dodi's Range Rover. Then he turned and had another conversation with some of the paparazzi who were still waiting. "He looked like someone with a plan," one photographer said. After exchanging a few words, he went back into the hotel. Security footage captured him bending down to tie his shoelaces. He spent 44 seconds doing it while people walked past him, completely unaware of what the night would bring. No one realized these would be the final ordinary moments, a hotel worker later shared. After fixing his laces, Paul headed upstairs toward the Imperial Suite where Diana and Dodi were staying. A new plan was taking shape. It had become clear that Diana and Dodi couldn't leave through the main entrance. There were too many cameras, too many people waiting. Someone suggested they needed to fool the photographers. The idea of using decoy cars was born from that conversation. "It might just work," Paul reportedly said. The plan was straightforward but required coordination. Kes Wingfield would leave through the front door with the decoy vehicles. His job was to draw the attention of the press and make them think Diana and Dodi were in one of those cars. Meanwhile, Diana, Dodi and Trevor would slip out the back entrance with Henri Paul as their driver. At 23 minutes past 11, Paul came downstairs again and stepped outside. He had a brief conversation with some of the paparazzi. He didn't say much, one of them remembered. 3 cars were positioned outside the hotel. There was Dodi's Range Rover and 2 similar-looking black Mercedes sedans. The goal was simple: make the photographers chase the wrong vehicle while Diana and Dodi escaped unnoticed. The hotel was now completely surrounded. Dozens of photographers waited outside, hoping to get shots of Diana. As midnight approached, the final details were confirmed. Diana and Dodi would leave through the rear entrance on Rue Cambon, and Henri Paul would drive them. Just after midnight, everything began to move. One of the decoy drivers entered the hotel lobby. Paul walked past him and went to speak with the actual drivers who would be involved in the plan. Upstairs, Diana and Dodi left their suite. Kes Wingfield walked with them down the corridor. Diana didn't appear nervous or frightened. She even laughed at something Dodi said, a staff member recalled. She seemed ready to leave and get away from all the attention. Henri Paul had a job to do that night. As someone in charge of security, it fell to him to make sure Diana and Dodi left the hotel safely. He stood near the entrance and made a small hand gesture, signaling that everything was ready. Just then, Diana smiled and raised her hand in a playful salute toward Henri. One staff member who witnessed it remembered the moment clearly. Even with all the pressure around her, Diana showed kindness and tried to keep things light. That simple wave revealed something about who she was. She remained warm and open, even in the middle of stress and uncertainty. To avoid being seen by the cameras at the front, they took the service elevator down to the tradesman's exit at the back of the hotel. Bodyguards checked the route to make sure it was clear. Downstairs, Paul gathered the drivers and went over the plan one final time. "Follow the lead car and don't stop for anything," he instructed them. At the back entrance, Diana, Dodi, Trevor and Paul met in the narrow corridor near the service door. They stood close together in the confined space. "Are we ready?" Paul asked. They nodded. There was no turning back now. At 19 minutes past midnight, a black Mercedes S280 pulled up at the rear entrance. Trevor Rees-Jones got into the front passenger seat. Diana and Dodi slipped into the back. Henri Paul slid behind the wheel. None of them had any idea that history was about to change forever. The car pulled away from the hotel and into the Paris night. Cameras tried to catch it, but the decoy plan had worked, at least for the first few moments. Some photographers ran toward the wrong cars. But it didn't take long before someone realized what had happened. "They've gone out the back," someone shouted. Even though the stunt, Mercedes had a head start, a few paparazzi noticed and began chasing after it. "They're getting away," someone yelled. Motorbike engines revved. Cars started following closely behind. The chase had begun. Henri Paul pressed down on the accelerator. The Mercedes took off through the streets of Paris, the night air filled with the sound of engines and the occasional flash of cameras. It was supposed to be a short drive to Dodi's apartment. Normally, the fastest route would have been through the Champs-Élysées, but that night, roadworks near the Place de la Concorde blocked the usual path. Paul made a split-second decision. He turned the car and followed the road along the River Seine instead. The car raced forward at increasing speed. He didn't slow down, a witness said later. Instead of turning right to exit toward Dodi's apartment, Paul drove straight ahead into the Alma Tunnel. The car was moving at over 95 kilometers per hour, well over 60 miles per hour. That tunnel wasn't designed for speeds like that, one traffic expert explained later. Then came the impact. The Mercedes hit a concrete wall on the right side, bounced off, and then smashed directly into the 13th pillar inside the tunnel. It was sudden and brutal, a rescue worker said. The crash was devastating. Henry Paul and Dodi Fayed were killed instantly. Diana was still alive but critically injured. Trevor Rees-Jones, though bleeding heavily and severely hurt, remained conscious. He survived, but barely, a doctor later confirmed. Some investigators and witnesses believe another vehicle was involved in the moments before the crash. People started talking about a white Fiat Uno. Physical evidence seemed to support this theory. Pieces of a tail light that matched a Fiat Uno were found inside the tunnel. There was also white paint on the Mercedes that didn't come from the car itself. These signs showed that some kind of contact had taken place, one investigator explained. Something happened. Just before the crash, someone said, a damaged white Fiat Uno was eventually linked to a photographer named James Anderson. He had connections to stories involving the royal family and had covered Diana before. But Anderson insisted he wasn't in Paris that night. He claimed he was elsewhere. His story had inconsistencies, a French police officer said. Still, nothing was ever definitively proven. The full truth about the Fiat Uno remained frustratingly out of reach. Inside the tunnel, the situation became chaotic very quickly. Photographers who had been chasing the car arrived within minutes. Some of them took photographs of the wreckage. They didn't help the injured, they just took pictures, an eyewitness said. When the public learned about this later, there was widespread anger and disgust. However, under French law at the time, there was nothing that explicitly prevented them from taking those photographs. 7 photographers were eventually arrested. Their cameras were confiscated, and many of the images they captured were never released to the public. They knew they had something significant, a reporter noted. Meanwhile, a doctor named Frederick Mailliez happened to be driving past the tunnel entrance. He saw the wreckage and immediately stopped his car. He ran over to help and began providing medical assistance to Diana until paramedics arrived. The emergency response team worked on her inside the crushed vehicle for many minutes before they could safely move her into an ambulance. They were trying to stabilize her condition, a medic explained. The hospital, Pitié-Salpêtrière, was less than 5 kilometers away. But the ambulance didn't rush directly there. Instead, the medical team followed French emergency protocols, which prioritized stabilizing patients before transport. They worked on her as they slowly made their way to the hospital. Her condition was deteriorating rapidly, a doctor later shared. It took 1 hour and 43 minutes from the time of the crash to get Diana to the hospital. Many people would later say that this delay may have cost her life. At the hospital, important figures began arriving. The French Minister of the Interior, the British Ambassador, and other officials gathered. They stood in the waiting areas in silence, a nurse recalled. Then the devastating news came. Princess Diana had died. She didn't make it, a doctor confirmed to those gathered. The news spread around the world within minutes. People everywhere were heartbroken. The crash in the Alma tunnel had already changed everything, but the days and months that followed brought even more pain and confusion. Nothing felt normal anymore, one witness said. The world was still trying to process what had happened, and the investigation was only just beginning to unfold. On the morning after Diana's death, French traffic officers made the decision to keep the westbound side of the tunnel closed. They didn't want to rush the process of examining the scene. We needed to make sure everything was documented properly, someone involved explained. They waited until every detail had been photographed, every measurement taken, and all the debris cleared away. It wasn't until 10 o'clock that morning that the road finally reopened to traffic. By then, people were already gathering at the tunnel entrance. Some just stood there staring at the spot where it happened. Others left flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Everyone wanted answers, but getting those answers would take years and raise even more questions. Later, when the formal inquest was underway, the coroner made a decision that he believed would help the jury understand what actually happened that night. He decided they needed to visit the Alma tunnel in person. He felt that seeing the location would give them a better sense of the space, the lighting, and the conditions Diana and the others faced. But even this straightforward plan ran into unexpected problems. During the visit, one of the police officers escorting the group lost control of his motorcycle and fell off. At the same time, the coach that was carrying some of the jury members experienced issues with its wheels. The whole trip started falling apart, one of the drivers said. What was supposed to be a helpful educational visit only added more stress to an already tense situation. It was just one problem after another, a court worker recalled. Then something even more troubling emerged during the inquest proceedings. The coroner informed the jury about a serious inconsistency involving Lord Stevens, the man who had led the initial investigation called Operation Paget. Lord Stevens had been the one asking the difficult questions at the start. Now, during the inquest, he found himself being questioned. The issue centered on something he had reportedly said to Henry Paul's parents during a meeting in Paris in November 2006. According to their account, Lord Stevens told them their son would not be blamed for driving under the influence of alcohol. Those words gave them some measure of comfort during an incredibly difficult time. But when the official report was finally released just weeks later, it said something completely different. The report concluded that Henry Paul had been more than 3 times over the legal alcohol limit when he got behind the wheel that night. This direct contradiction forced the jury to ask some very difficult questions. Why would Lord Stevens say one thing to the grieving parents and then allow a report to state the opposite? The coroner presented 3 possible explanations to help the jury understand what might have happened. The first possibility was that Lord Stevens genuinely didn't know what would be included in the final version of the report. That would mean he wasn't fully aware of all the findings when he spoke to the parents, a jury member noted. The second possibility was that he may have lied to Henry Paul's parents in an attempt to protect them from additional pain. If that's true, then how can we trust anything else he said? Someone whispered in the courtroom. The third possibility was that something significant changed between that November meeting and the publication of the final report. Something doesn't add up here, another juror said quietly. Whatever the actual truth was, the jury had to dig into it carefully. The coroner acknowledged that this was an emotional and sensitive matter. He believed that Lord Stevens would eventually provide a full explanation for the discrepancy. Maybe he was just trying to ease their suffering at that moment, one person suggested. But instead of providing clarity and closure, his words to the Paul family had added another layer of confusion and doubt to an already complicated case. That wasn't the only controversial issue the jury had to address. There was another persistent rumor that simply refused to go away no matter how much time passed. People kept asking whether Diana had been pregnant at the time of the crash. Some photographs taken in the weeks before her death seemed to fuel speculation. The coroner informed the jury that Diana had been taking contraceptive pills, which would have made pregnancy highly unlikely. Still, nothing could be confirmed with absolute certainty, a medical expert explained. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence, Lord Stevens maintained his position firmly. He stated that blood tests conducted after the crash showed no signs of pregnancy whatsoever. The tests were clear on this point, he insisted. He also mentioned that Diana's closest friends had shared with investigators that she wasn't planning to start a new family or even get engaged at that time. She was moving forward with her life, but not rushing into anything major, a friend testified in court. Even with these facts presented clearly, doubt continued to linger in some quarters. Dodi Fayed's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, strongly believed that Diana was expecting a child when she died. He never let go of that belief. Someone close to him said his conviction clashed directly with the official findings, and that made the jury's job considerably harder. They had to weigh emotional testimony against medical evidence and try to determine what was actually true. As the months wore on, the jury had to deal with an increasing number of claims, denials, and conflicting accounts. Some came from people testifying under oath. Others came from individuals outside the courtroom who felt they had important information to share. Everyone seemed to have something to say about what happened, a journalist covering the inquest noted. Emotions ran extremely high throughout the process. People held strong opinions about every aspect of the case. It became clear that Diana's death had left behind much more than just sadness and loss. It had created a web of mystery, suspicion, and unanswered questions that seemed to grow more tangled with time. Who's actually telling the truth? Here, one member of the public asked outside the courthouse. For many people, Diana represented something more than royalty. She had touched individual lives through her charity work. She had helped people who felt forgotten. She had shown genuine care and compassion where others in positions of power had not. Many observers felt the inquest had taken the focus away from who Diana truly was as a person. She deserves to rest in peace, someone said. But others believed strongly that the inquest was absolutely necessary. We have to know what really happened that night, a man in the crowd insisted. They felt that without complete answers, the doubt and speculation would never end. For them, the lengthy and expensive process represented an important chance to finally uncover the truth, and that made it worthwhile, regardless of the cost. As the inquest continued, more stories appeared in newspapers and on television almost daily. Some were shocking revelations, others were strange, tangential details that didn't seem relevant. Every single day there was something new to report, one juror said. But many of these stories didn't actually help clarify what happened. They only made the truth harder to see through all the noise and speculation. Still, the fundamental purpose of the inquest remained the same throughout. It had been established to find the real reason behind the crash and the deaths that resulted from it. Every fact was supposed to be thoroughly checked and verified. Every witness was meant to be heard. The inquest wasn't only about one tragic night in Paris. It was about everything that led up to that moment and everything that came after. The investigation examined Diana's state of mind in the weeks before her death. It looked at the decisions made by hotel security staff. It questioned the actions of the paparazzi who chased the car through the streets. It analysed the medical response and whether different choices might have saved Diana's life. It considered conspiracy theories and dismissed some while acknowledging that others couldn't be completely ruled out. The process was exhaustive, meticulous, and often painful for everyone involved. In the end, those conducting the inquest hoped to bring light into what remained the darkest tunnel in modern memory. They wanted to provide answers that families and the public could accept. They wanted to separate fact from fiction, truth from speculation. Whether they succeeded in that goal remains a matter of debate even today. Some people felt satisfied with the conclusions reached. Others remained convinced that important details were still being hidden or overlooked. What's clear is that the questions surrounding that night continue to matter to people around the world. Diana's life and death became part of collective memory in a way that few events do. The investigation into her final hours revealed not just facts about a car crash, but deeper truths about privacy, fame, responsibility, and the sad price of being constantly watched. The tunnel where she died remains a place of pilgrimage for some and a symbol of loss for many others. What are your thoughts on everything that led up to the crash? Is there anything you believe might have been overlooked or deserves more attention? Share your views in the comments below. If you found this information valuable, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth coverage. Before you leave, check out the other videos available on your screen.